So the United States and Iran have failed to reach a deal after 21 hours of high-stakes talks in Pakistan over the weekend. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Mason Richey, Professor of International Politics at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Richey, thanks for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, U.S. Vice President JD Vance says Iran is choosing not to accept U.S. terms, while Iran says it did not expect a deal in the first meeting. What are the main points of disagreement between these two sides?
Yeah, so, obviously, Vice President Vance, has a certain way of framing this to blame Iran for the failure of this negotiation. Negotiations are rarely a question of one side accepting another side's terms, except in case of absolute surrender, which may be what the U.S. wants, obviously. So we saw Vance, Steve Witkoff, a real estate developer, and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and also a real estate developer, met with their Iranian counterparts, including the foreign minister in Pakistan and Islamabad. There was no agreement reached. This was not a surprise. First of all, you could consider this the first round of negotiations. Frequently this is not going to lead to something anyway. But also, more importantly, I think there's still significant distance between the two sides' positions. And the main sticking point that seemed to come out of it, really two of them, were in the first place, very immediately, what would happen with the 440.9 kilograms of Iranian enriched uranium at a 60% level, which would in theory allow a production of 9 to 12 nuclear warheads. And then secondly, Iran's desire to continue or to impose a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. There are other areas that are also, under a significant contention, including Iran's, larger nuclear program and its regional role as a problem for instability in the Middle East region.
Right, and after the talks fail, President Trump is now saying the U.S. will block the Strait of Hormuz. What happens next? Where does the conflict go from here if a deal isn't reached before the two-week ceasefire ends?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. Iran's already saying that, if this blockade goes through, that would constitute essentially a violation of the ceasefire anyway. The U.S., would argue that Iran has itself also violated the ceasefire in the hours and days after the ceasefire announcement took place. So we are going now into a period where the United States seems to be arguing that the Navy, the U.S. Navy, will blockade entrance to and exit from Iranian's ports and begin at least some type of operation towards some of the demining parts of the Straits of Hormuz. The question, of course, especially with respect to the blockade, is whether or not Iran will react kinetically. Will they fire missiles or rockets at U.S. naval ships? And if so, would they manage to hit them? And if so, what would happen there? So there's obviously a significant escalation risk there. What one would, I think, hope, and probably one can imagine this is the case, is that both sides, both the U.S. side with the blockade and the Iranian side with its response, both rhetorical and otherwise, would essentially be trying to gain leverage for a second set of negotiations to come up in the future. And let's just hope that the ceasefire manages to hold until they can get that type of meeting scheduled.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. And Israel and Lebanon, they're also planning to hold negotiations in Washington. How do you think those talks will play out?
Yeah, I should be careful here because I'm not really an expert in either Israel or Lebanon, to be bluntly honest with you. But my understanding is that in significant degree, those negotiations are partially in support of the larger U.S.-Iran ceasefire. So, if the ceasefire itself between the U.S. and Iran, doesn't hold, it's questionable what type of value the Lebanon-Israel talks would have. They are still scheduled to meet in Washington, with the U.S. being, I believe, represented by its ambassador to Lebanon, Israel by its ambassador to the U.S. And I think we're not sure who the Lebanese representative is going to be. There, the stakes are, from Israel's perspective, trying to defang Hezbollah, push them back from some of the areas along the Lebanon-Israel border. I'm not exactly sure what Lebanon wants out of the situation, but I think, more generally, as I said, that this particular set of talks was in part supposed to be about supporting the ceasefire more broadly, since the Iran-U.S. war has escalated not only vertically but also horizontally to encompass other countries in the region.
Right, I see. And U.S. intelligence agencies have reportedly obtained information that China may have sent missiles to Iran in recent weeks. So is China playing a more active role in this war?
Yeah, that's very difficult to say. My first reaction when I saw that was, okay, that's perhaps not a surprise. If anything, it might have been a bit of surprise that that hadn't been happening in some capacity already. Maybe not finished systems being sent to Iran, but at least the components that would allow Iran to construct them. I've seen other experts in the U.S. who've cast some doubt on that. And so I'm actually not sure where to come down on that. Unfortunately, not many of us have really privileged access to that. I would say, it would not surprise me that that would be the case, not only because China may think that it's to its benefit to support at least a sort of nominal ally or at least a nominal strategic partner. And perhaps get the United States further embroiled in a quagmire in that region. But also this might be a play from China to get some leverage over Trump in its upcoming meeting between Trump and Xi, which is still as of now scheduled for next May. So that might be a part of the tactic or the strategy on the part of China as well.
Right. All right, Professor Richey, thanks so much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.